This program deals with devil worship and satanic beliefs. It contains explicit scenes and descriptions of violent crimes and rituals.
Americans are asking, who attacked our country?
You have declared a subliminal jihad against the United States. Can you tell us why?
Everything pertaining to what's happening has never come to the surface. The world will never know the true facts of what occurred, my motives.
And night fell on a different world.
And Iblis is thinking, I should be getting this position, not Adam, and this guy is created from dirt.
And how does the army feel about you being head of the Temple of Set?
And the conspiracy theorists can say what they will, but
I want you to give me power over Adam, and I want you to give me soldiers and minions and all of these things.
The people had so much to gain and had such a material motive for putting me in a position I'm in. They'll never let the true facts come aboard to the world.
And I want you to be able to give me the ability to whisper into the hearts of mankind.
And who was the grotto leader?
Don't remember his name.
You don't remember the name of a person who involved you in murder?
now these people are in very high positions,
Yes.
Welcome back to Subliminal Jihad, Episode 7. I am your co-host, Dimitri.
I'm Khalid.
And today we are going to pivot away from our discussion of ET-channeled religious texts, and we're going to get back down to a more material affair, if you will. But as we're going to find out, it maybe wasn't so material after all. And this being the second week in September, that's right, we are going to do an episode about 9/11.
Yeah.
But not just any episode about 9/11. I think a lot has been said over this incident, which is extremely formative, and I know probably both of our lives, it's safe to say. Generationally, the September 11th, 2001 truly was a sort of BC AD changing of the aeons in a way, in a very real way, regardless of whatever your religious beliefs are or if you don't have any. It unmistakably changed the landscape of our country and our world at almost every level, I would say.
Definitely. And it was definitely a formative event for, like, the millennial generation, for sure. And everything that followed, the Iraq War, I think, maybe the formative political event for our generation, certainly for me. Absolutely. It was critical to the forming of my sort of political consciousness in the 2000s as a youth. And I guess if we want to do sort of the ritual American thing, maybe we can mention sort of where were we on that morning, and what was it like? What was our subjective experience of 9/11? I actually had a prophetic dream about 9/11. Really? Yes. The night before 9/11, I dreamt of, like, people falling out of buildings and, like, jumping out of, like, skyscrapers. And I think that it was sort of, maybe I had heard about the stock market crash, like maybe learning about the Roaring '20s or something. And that was maybe, because I remember asking my mom in the car on the way to school, like, about Black Tuesday,
that's so weird.
Black Tuesday, yeah. After it happened, I remember telling my friend that, like, while we were waiting for the bus, and, like, some fucking dude, like, an 8th grader or something, was like, no, you did not have that dream, my friend. But I did have a prophetic dream about 9/11. When it actually happened, I guess, I was a little bit confused when I first heard about it, because I didn't associate the Twin Towers with the World Trade Center. I don't really remember if I knew, like, what the World Trade Center was or, like, its importance or anything. I thought when people first told me that at the time I heard they were bombed, that the Twin Towers were bombed, I thought the Twin Towers they were referring to were the Astro Towers from, like, the World's Fair that you often see, like, if you're driving into New York.
In Queens, like near JFK.
Yeah. So, a little bit less of an appealing target, or, less of a earth-shattering event if those had been toppled. But, the ones, like, from Men in Black, maybe if people aren't from New York.
Maybe some predictive programming. I don't know.
But,
but you, it's worth mentioning that, like, you grew up outside of New York.
Yeah, well, I am from like one of the communities that was like hardest hit by 9/11 because a lot of the people in my community worked in that area because it was like a rich sort of place, and like a lot of people there were like stockbrokers or like people who worked on Wall Street. So it was actually one of the hardest hit communities, like proportionally in terms of people who died in 9/11. Was my hometown.
And how did that play out when you were in class? Were there kids in your school who had parents that were working in the World Trade Center or downtown?
Yeah, my own dad would have been down there, but he actually was on a trip at the time. He might have done it, but no. But anyway, like
not subliminal jihad, not above suspecting our own dads of doing 9/11.
Yes,
just want to throw that out
talk
there.
about a subliminal jihad. But anyway, but yeah, so there were definitely people who, like, you know, and there were lots of like candlelight vigils and that type of thing. Like, it was very much like, you know, I think that there was some press around like how many people in our town died, like, even internationally people talked about it. So it was like a big thing. And it was a very strange time. Like, I remember, you know, like the radio edits of I can be your hero, baby. Like, you know, intercut with like the, you know, clips about firefighters and things like that. You know, I remember all the articles
Today there's
about
been
like
a national tragedy.
Yeah.
You know, stuff like that. Like, we got a fire in the North Tower.
Yeah,
like,
exactly.
Kind of stuff.
Like,
there was a whole genre
like
of
fade
stuff.
out. Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, I remember one of my favorites that really tugged on the heartstrings that fall was a bootleg MP3 I downloaded from Napster that was like The Wind Cries Mary by Jimi Hendrix with a bunch of news clips and audio and things like that sort of cut over it. That was a lot of like firefighters and George W. Bush talking and giving speeches and witness things. It was very legitimately, it was hard not to be moved by in such a climate as this. It was especially if you were an adolescent, or I mean really anybody, like, you know, if you were a boomer, if you're an older person, if you're a little kid, everybody was affected by it. And the media really, I mean, they sprang into action kind of memorializing this event immediately. I don't know how many hundreds of times all of us who were glued to CNN during those days, like, watched the planes hit the towers and watched the towers collapse. Like, it was just played on an infinite loop in a 24-hour news cycle, probably for like at least several months. And I guess to contrast with your experience, I was 3,000 miles away, about as far away from New York City and Washington as you could get. I was in the Bay Area, and it was my first week of high school. And I went to a Catholic high school, so I think it was even more primed for sort of framing things in a kind of spiritual way. But really, I think I was just about to leave to go to school when I think one of my aunts called, and I remember my mom exclaiming, "Turn on the TV, we're under attack." And I thought, what do you mean under attack? And we turned it on, and so we found out about it when it was right after the second plane had hit. And so we turned on the TV, and there were two big gaping holes in the World Trade Center. And I think word had just gotten out that a plane had hit the Pentagon. And then I had to go to school to go to my first week of marching band practice, which was a weird vibe. Because on the drive to school, the towers started collapsing. And so by the time I got there were no more World Trade Centers. And, you know, they didn't send everybody home because nobody knew what the hell was happening. I remember some, like, older kids were, like, joking in the hallways, like, dude, like, I hope they like, crash into San Francisco so we can go home. And I remember being kind of mad at, like, do you fuckers not realize what's going on right now? Like, this has changed the whole game. Like, we're like under attack by something, and like we're gonna have a war. And one of the weird things about 9/11, you know, you're like a little 14-year-old 9/11 humble brag, is I was the first kid. I think I was the only kid in my history class that day who, when our teacher asked us, gentlemen, who did this attack, I like shot my hand up like a geopolitics nerd, because I knew that it was Osama bin Laden, which is ironic because now I don't think it was Osama bin Laden really. But like on that day, because I think a year earlier, I had a very good history teacher in middle school. Shout out to Mr. Russi if you ever hear this. But he would make us do these current event assignments every week where you had to pick a news article of something that was going around, something happening in politics or in the world, and then write like 2 paragraphs kind of summarizing it and why you think it's important. And I just, because I don't know, I was in my peak rap metal phase in middle school, I was sort of drawn to the USS Cole bombing, and I cut out a news clipping of, this thing where somebody drove a dinghy into a Navy vessel in, I believe it was in Yemen, and in the port, and killed about 20 sailors. And it went into a little detail about how, like authorities believe that, this was done by the Saudi terrorist mastermind, Osama bin Laden, who has declared a jihad against the United States 3 years ago. And he runs an organization called Al-Qaeda, which means the base in Arabic. And they have declared that they are believed to be responsible for the Kenya and Tanzania embassy bombings in 1998. And I think some other minor attacks as well. And so it's interesting. Like, I mean, there were a couple of terrorist attacks that sort of established that bin Laden is trying to get at U.S. targets, and they were all overseas. But like, I was very like, ooh, yeah, Osama bin Laden did it. Al Qaeda, they're behind it. And then it was very surreal to watch that then, become the narrative that came out probably by the end of the day. I mean, they were pushing it within an hour or two. I think if you were watching news all day, that I think reports are coming out that this may have something to do with Osama bin Laden. And I think when they found one of the Saudi hijackers' passports like perfectly intact on the ground outside of the World Trade Center, that had just like flown out of the plane, they were able to quote unquote confirm that this is in fact what had happened, and there was a jihad and it was coming for us. That was basically where I was, and then that did change the entire. I literally was like, okay, this is going to be the backdrop of like your entire high school experience. People are already talking about like joining the military or not wanting to get drafted into the military, and things like that. And the world historical significance is like really difficult to understate, like how it felt at the time, that like the 90s had been so kind of petty and superficial, and even though there was a lot of horrible things going on in America, it was like, oh, did Bill Clinton get an intern to like give him a blowjob? Like, let's all make jokes about it. And or like, did video games turn you into a Columbine shooter, which we've talked about, and like. But still, it all felt very small ball, and like as Francis Fukuyama had said, we had reached the end of history, and the great epochal struggle between capitalism and communism had been resolved, and we were the undisputed winners, and now sort of liberal democratic world capitalism was going to be just the end point of history, that nothing really significant was ever going to happen again. And then this attack came and just blew a big fat hole in that sort of certainty that people had.
Would you dance if I asked you to dance?
Our hearts and prayers are with the victims.
Would you run?
Some people were going into churches
and never look back.
There was this girl that had a big hole in her leg.
Would you cry?
You just couldn't outrun it.
If you saw me cry,
you just couldn't outrun this cloud of dust.
Would you save my soul tonight?
You prepare for the worst, but you don't believe it'll happen?
Would you tremble?
And this is the worst.
If I touched your lips,
I was thrown to a window.
Would you laugh?
I was very lucky to get out.
Oh, please tell me this. Now would you die?
When I left the building,
for the one you love,
I just thought that we were headed to some triage or something.
Hold me in your arms tonight. I can be your hero, baby.
Big explosion happened. Some guy came out. His skin was all off.
I can kiss away the pain.
I helped him out.
The many, many innocent people
I will stand by you forever
that will have lost their lives.
You can take my breath away.
Firefighters, everyone yelling, run, run, people running down the street.
Would you swear
Yeah, I remember most of all, like, more than being like moved like emotionally, what I remember is like I remember like the fear. I remember I remember there's a Time magazine article about like all the places that like dirty bombs could be set off and things like that. You know, I remember like
if they got a nuke. Not to mention the anthrax scare, which was sent to Tom Daschle and I think Patrick Moynihan or Pat Leahy, I believe. And that, you know, which came out years later, it's still murky as to like where that came from, but it basically got traced back to a U.S. government scientist at like a defense biolab that had like stolen the laboratory-made anthrax and then mailed it out to a bunch of people and wrote a bunch of dumb, like, crude, like, praise to Allah, like, death to Israel, and then mailed it out to all these people who conveniently were kind of stonewalling the Patriot Act from getting passed, and then they got a bunch of anthrax packages sent to them, and then that Patriot Act got through real quick after that. And but like that didn't come out, you know, the exposure of that, and I'm talking in the mainstream press, like this was reported on in like major newspapers that, it seems like this one guy just went crazy and decided to do this, and then when they closed in on him, he like killed himself. Like, case closed. So it was like a deluded lone anthrax man. Was the sort of limited hangout, but even that didn't come out for maybe like 5, 6, 7 years after 9/11. At the time, we were still thinking like, if this guy could pull off this sophisticated of an operation and then he has access to like anthrax, holy shit, like he could shut down America. And everything was kind of, a lot of the things in the culture were kind of aimed at combating that fear. You know, George W. Bush told everybody to go out shopping, right? Very famously. That was going to be the way we would fight back against it. It honestly has some weird echoes of kind of coronavirus 2020 kind of thing. Directives from government, stay at home, like, you know, wear a mask, not like passing total judgment on those, you know, health tactics, but the way in which they're kind of rolled out as pronouncements. And then there's this like hysterical fear that is cultivated by, you know, CNN usually leading kind of the pack. But
it's an interesting comparison, though, because I feel like there are a lot of key contrasts where one is such like a targeted sort of symbolic kind of attack, and the other one is like a military action, or, you know, not a military action because it targets civilians, but you know what I mean, like a terrorist attack, whereas the other one is pervasive.
You're right. It's so nebulous. You can't even tell how deadly it is. You just know it's very almost like Lovecraftian in its invisibility and its ability to like drive us all crazy. It's like a Joker virus in a way. It's like, you know, turning us like, you know, like exploiting our fear to turn us against, you know, one another and like paralyze our economy and our society and degrade whatever's left of like our old institutions and open the door like for kind of maybe some more like demonic projects that the ruling class has in store for us, regardless of whether or not they, you know, unleash this sort of, you know, biophenomenon upon the world. But anyways, like that's definitely an episode for another day, but we just wanted to I think it's good to point out kind of how the media performatively, I don't know, is so critical to like our perception of these attacks. And I mean, 9/11, you're right, is so clearly symbolic, and we will get to that because I guess we might have buried the lead a little bit, but today we're gonna kind of fly over all of the more material conspiracy theories surrounding 9/11. So that includes things like, at the very top skim level is like, did the Bush administration let it happen? Beyond that is like, did they help orchestrate it to happen? Beyond that is like, what were the different networks? Like, was it just the 19 hijackers and Osama bin Laden and a few key operatives? Or, you know, were they backed by other foreign intelligence agencies as well as our own? Then there's the attacks themselves. Like, you know, were there explosives planted in the buildings? Because no two skyscrapers have ever collapsed in that fashion after getting hit by a plane. And granted, not many 757s have crashed into skyscrapers, but it's still. And then, you know, the collapse of World Trade Center, and like, how did that happen? Or the Pentagon and the fact they've never released video footage of what hit the Pentagon, and the curious targeting of some of the offices in the World Trade Center and in the Pentagon. And, you know, all of that, I think, is very important. And it's like, now I'm going on 15 years. I think probably it was around 2005, like the loose change era. Remember that? That was the first.
Of course, yeah, I remember.
The first really groundbreaking thing that went kind of proto-viral on the internet and was kind of opened up people's eyes to just this kind of discourse that actually had been happening with certain researchers. People like Michael Rupert, Dave McGowan were talking about this like literally on September 12th, being like, oh, this is obviously like an orchestrated thing. But it was really, it took a few years amidst all the chaos and hubbub for those voices to kind of break through. And it was really the war in Iraq that precipitated that, because it was so obviously kind of a lie and a mendacious like use of our national trauma to like invade a country that had nothing to do with 9/11, and then it was going horribly, and it seemed like Bush really was like becoming this sort of imperial warlord that was gonna remake, the neocons were gonna remake the world by brute force, and that was a big turning point, I think, also politically, in terms of like realizing that they really did, like, how deep does this go? Like, I mean, they lied to get us into the war in Iraq, and then we all just like ate up this 9/11 thing. We're so traumatized by it, but like, look, you start to see some of these connections and weird anomalies, but then you get to a deeper level of some people saying that there were, say, no planes that hit. I think you mentioned the documentary In Plain Sight.
Yeah.
That I think endorses the hologram theory that the planes were, either hijacked or shot down, and like, as we said, Michael Aquino endorsed this theory very strangely. Mm-hmm. Somebody who's like very high up in military intelligence, and this is kind of like really right up his alley, the idea of like a mega ritual psyop kind of thing. But I've always shied away from that. However, then you look at the Pentagon, and the Pentagon, I think even Michael Moore in like Fahrenheit 9/11, didn't he have a segment on it? Or maybe it was Loose Change that really went into like, why are there only 3 still frames from a security camera that show like a blurry object like crash? So some people thought that maybe like, was it a cruise missile or some kind of drone that crashed into the west side of the Pentagon, which housed the accounting department and the Office of National Intelligence, who were investigating like fraud and embezzlement and like secret money trails, and they all died, so that's convenient. And there are kind of things like that. Some people, some conspiracy theorists, popular in kind of the alt media over the last like 20 years have pushed that, there was some kind of directed energy weapon that took down the towers the way it happened, or like a miniature nuclear bomb, and that's why that the debris was so toxic. And I think some of those are kind of red herrings that are sort of thrown into the mix to distract you. And without getting too deep into like which ones, do I buy more or not, let's just say that like the focus of today's podcast overall is going to be kind of above and below all of those things.
Yes.
Because we're discussing a book, I guess let's introduce it, right? We are discussing a book that we've been aware of for some time, and you're very well acquainted with, that has the rather striking title, The Most Dangerous Book in the World, 9/11 as Mass Ritual, by SK Bain.
Yes. I think I may have heard of this book from you, but I was probably more into it than you were at the time. It was some years we've been kind of into SK Bain or casual SK Bain fans. We'll get to the basic premise of the book in a second, but I think that it's important to know that who SK Bain is, which he acknowledges in his work, is that he's a former art editor at the Weekly Standard, and he was like a colleague of Tucker Carlson, John Podhoretz, David Brooks, all these people. He shared offices with the Project for the New American Century, the people who are like, oh, it would be great if we had a new Pearl Harbor, that type of thing.
Yeah,
so,
the PNAT crowd.
Yeah.
The neocons,
Yeah, so I guess he went rogue from that world, and he got, I guess, deeply into this type of stuff, basically what he does, what I think is very interesting about this book, is that there's all sorts of comments that have been made by people in various domains of intelligentsia or, the conspiracy world about 9/11 being like kind of an artwork or having sort of an artistic design to it, whether it's Baudrillard art or, we talked about last time.
Stockhausen.
Stockhausen. So what I think that is very interesting about 9/11 as mass ritual is that he actually makes an attempt, whether you agree with every aspect of it or of his analysis or not, but he makes an attempt to analyze the events in that sort of term, in those terms, kind of as a production or a play, like an artwork. He even divides them into acts and scenes and things like that, an occult ritual or this sort of drama, basically sees the entire thing. Really, he sees not only the events of that day as being a mass ritual, but a mass ritual that was premeditated, I guess, even centuries in advance. And he sees all maybe not centuries, but at least decades in advance.
He throws it out there that maybe this, just how long was this being planned? I think he at least he commits to the idea that George H.W. Bush gave a speech about the first Gulf War on September 11th, 1990, and mentioned, as he did in a few speeches that year, his goal, which was to create a new world order that, would guarantee prosperity and peace for everyone. And SK Bain saw that as, he said it 11 years to the day before 9/11. So it was probably, and we'll get into some other theories that he does briefly cite in the book that do have at least an intriguing hypothesis for how George H.W. Bush could have been centrally involved, and the genesis of 9/11 could, in fact, in a very material way, have been laid in 1990 and 1991. But we'll touch on that later. It's not really S.K. Bain's full focus. His is really that this was a Crowleyan, Luciferian mega ritual played out to billions of people around the world on kind of the grandest stage ever staged, and was, had a explicitly esoteric and mystical kind of objective to transform our world and our consciousness and the way we saw the world through this very spectacular, almost Hollywood scale kind of production. And many other people have made that comparison in other contexts. I think there was that Adam Curtis documentary from Hypernormalization from a few years ago that had that montage of 90s Hollywood movie, kind of disaster movies where various monuments and skyscrapers in Western civilization were destroyed by a tsunami or an asteroid or a monster or aliens, and people looking up at the towers. I think a few times it actually is the towers that get destroyed.
I think what's so interesting about this is that, well, on one hand, he definitely does say, even before, he definitely does indict Poppy Bush in a lot of his work, but he also talks about, the entire area around the World Trade Center, Building 7 with its trapezoidal roof and everything, and the sort of trident shape at the bottom of the towers. Those are he talks about that in the Pentagon as being kind of like a ritual complex. But I think this kind of ties back to what we were talking about in terms of who is responsible ultimately for this. That's who this sort of sense of this overwhelming, and I think that's something we're dealing with today, be it with the coronavirus or with other sort of cultural fervors and paranoias around the cabal and things like that. I think that there's through the architecture of 9/11, through its design, it suggests this kind of greater force, this greater power that is orchestrating this. And it has the effect, the sense of all these films there's an introduction to the book that I think is interesting by Peter Levenda, who I guess has written about this type of stuff before.
Is very suspicious figure that I've never read his books, but he is a person that, wrote a lot about Nazi occultism and a lot of these interesting subjects, but then also has very strange connections to people like Tom DeLonge from Blink-182, the now arch UFO kind of face man for this shadowy network of To the Stars Academy that is pushing ET disclosure. And I think Levenda they're in a photo with them and John Podesta at the White House. And it's like, what are you doing, like, hanging out with John Podesta, Peter Lavenda? But anyways, I digress. But yeah,
while he's like talking up SK Bain, he says something that's interesting, which is like, he talks about how SK Bain really understands the unconscious mind of the state. And he says that this is something that's done by agents so powerful and unknown that a belief in an ultimate secret society, in caps, is our only option. Or they are evidence of the workings of an even, again in capitals, darker force. And no one is in charge, which is so interesting. I mean, actually, a couple years ago, one of our earlier collaborations between the two of us, Dimitri, which maybe set the stage for the subliminal jihad. I did a conference presentation kind of on this book and on kind of the idea of the Dracularity of 9/11. And I think Dracula is an interesting way to, again, it's interesting that when we talk about the parallel with coronavirus, because Dracula, of course, is like a very viral sort of
vampire bat.
Yeah, right. Yeah, he's but the one of the movies, and relative to what you were saying about the films, like one of the movies I really focused on vis-a-vis that was this film with Gerard Butler, Dracula 2000. And in that movie, in the original Victorian novel, Dracula, of course, Dracula is an interesting figure because he's kind of like from this liminal space of like Wallachia, Transylvania, and he's kind of someone who's, the historical like Vlad Tepes is like in some like contaminated by Islam, because he's sort of brought up in the Ottoman court and everything, and his own brother was like an Ottoman soldier and things like that. And of course, it's all sort of in the novel Dracula, where he's a sort of Eastern kind of figure, but of course also like very demonic, very satanic. And in that book, he comes over to London via boat. But the way that it's updated in this movie, Dracula 2000, is, of course, that he comes over by plane. In fact, by a hijacked plane, by criminals who kind of steal his coffin from some secret vault or something. And the plane ends up crashing in a field. And, and when he emerges, what's really interesting about this that I thought was such a trenchant thing, aside from the whole figure of Dracula and how I think that he's really, he's like the archetypal monster, in the Western imagination.
And Bram Stoker's Dracula was sort of intended to be, the more modern conception of Dracula was sort of supposed to be a bit of a metaphor for like the lurking, menacing, like Oriental kind of like coming from Eastern Europe, coming from the Ottoman Empire at the turn of the 20th century.
Yeah, for sure. It's definitely very much like a colonial type of novel, and it also has like the aspect of like the disease sort of paranoia. But there's many layers to that. But all that stuff is like very much present. But so what's interesting is that he crashes, and what's going on is there's a news report happening on the crash, and there's a very interesting scene where Dracula kind of sneaks up on the news reporter from behind, and because the image of the vampire can't be seen in mirrors, this also, I guess, applies to the, video cameras. And Dracula can't be seen, so he's this sort of invisible force that comes up from behind and attacks. And that, I think, is the perfect sort of metaphor for this type of thing. Like, it's an invisible, like, you can't pin it down, like, what the the agencies and the operations behind this are.
There's so many layers to the onion, and there do seem to be almost like you just get this sense that there is some kind of deeper force at play, very much like things like the Kennedy assassination or RFK or Martin Luther King, but like it's never done on such a spectacular level before.
Yeah, it's this sort of incredible like release of energy where there's this irresistible like drive to contemplate these dimensions of it, and like it's sort of unspeakable, but everyone kind of and I think that that montage from hypernormalization is kind of a sense of this. And of course, this movie that I'm talking about came out really before 9/11. It's actually in certain markets it's called Dracula 2001, and others it's called Dracula 2000 because it came out in the year 2000. But it's like there's this it's something where this is all in some way there are forces that I think the idea of the unconscious mind of the state is very interesting. There's psychic forces, there's aspects
I think we talked about
this.
we talked about before how there are a lot of actors in the world of particularly sort of covert power operations, both in the government and private industry and intelligence services, where I think it's more common than we would think that people are not fully aware of what they're participating in. And truly, like, things are so officially compartmentalized, both in business and especially in the military and in government and in places like the CIA. Information is so compartmentalized that it's quite real. It's not outlandish to think that certain people played a critical part but had no idea of what they were really playing a part of, and it makes it hard because I think sometimes with sort of trying to unmask conspirators of a specific action, you want to sort of ascribe a sort of conscious malice and intent to those people. But what we see with 9/11, it also goes back to what we talked about power sort of evolving into a more distributed network, like more modeled after the structure of the architecture of the internet, where there's like nodes that interlock and interact and kind of embark on certain things together, but it's not kind of a clearly defined hierarchy or chain of command that you can kind of point to, like, oh, okay, it was these guys in this smoke-filled room that like did it. It's like much murkier, and but also I think it's a phenomenon that we have to pay attention to and dissect, because it's clearly a chief way in which power functions in our world. And I think it's like one of the most occulted aspects of how power functions is these very liminal kind of collaborations between various conspirators. So, it's like you throw everybody from the Saudis and the Saudi intelligence services. Bandar Bush was friends of the Bush family. And then you have like the neocons, the kind of Israel-linked neocons that are in the Bush administration that wrote the PNAC document. And then you have like the Pakistani ISI who, had their own games going on in regards to Afghanistan. And then, even like you can't rule out like the MI6 and, people like that. And then the FBI, the CIA, the NSA, they all kind of function in their own specific areas, and you saw a lot of like blocking of information between those agencies, so that perhaps like some people were boxed out of knowing what was really going on, and then other people were focused on one area. Like people in the CIA were trying to turn, this is their excuse, they were trying to turn Al-Qaeda people, which is why they didn't want to share this information with the FBI and like bust these guys, because they were tracking them. And it just gets, but then there's nobody you can kind of pin it all on as like, okay, like where did this idea generate from? Like who had the original idea to do this? Like there had to have been some kind of sit down where these things, because this thing is complex, no matter what way you slice it. It's very complex and has a lot of moving pieces, and a lot of things had to go just right for 9/11 to work. Like there had to be military exercises that moved all the planes to the West Coast and Alaska so that they couldn't scramble any fighter jets on that morning. There had to be war game exercises going on at like NORAD so that there were fake planes flying across the screen that were like fictional hijackings for a drill, but then they were mixed with like real hijackings, and nobody knew like where to scramble jets to, even if they had them, and just like so many things, like and like the people that taught these hijackers how to fly, which like one of those schools was a basically CIA front kind of air base that got caught trafficking like 50 kilos of heroin into Florida like a year or two before 9/11, and then mysteriously like weren't prosecuted for it. So then you have this whole drug connection. So but you could spin off like that forever, but it doesn't make it easy to figure out like who, it's a little bit too pat to say like Bush did it. You know what I mean? Like, which, maybe some podcasters like to say that, but...
Today, we've had a national tragedy.
I was there when the tower, and it just rained buildings.
2 airplanes have crashed into the World Trade Center in an apparent terrorist attack on our country.
There was no warning.
The devastation is unfathomable.
After all the jets are in the boxes. The twin towers of the World Trade Center and the clowns have all gone to have been wiped from the New York skyline. You can hear happiness staggering on down the street.
Governments worldwide held crisis meetings.
It's
quite a devastating scene from what we're told.
Freedom itself was attacked this morning by a faceless coward, and freedom will be defended.
I was in the building when I heard, a loud explosion.
Firefighters simply can't get in to fight these fires right now.
It is unclear how many people have died.
After the astonishing and horrifying attack early this morning.
I want to reassure the American people the United States will hunt down and punish those responsible.
It was unbelievable seeing the second jet come crashing into the second tower. What is going on?
I was thrown to a window, so I was very lucky to get out.
I did want to read, before we jump into, properly 9/11, the most dangerous book in the world, 9/11 is Mass Ritual, I would like to read just a brief, one of the appendixes in that book, which I feel like, if anybody is not of a, suspicious enough mind yet and isn't familiar with the anomalies of 9/11, instead of me kind of rambling about it, I think if I read this sort of satirical summary of 9/11 by James Corbett, who is kind of a longtime conspiracy researcher, a little too libertarian for my taste, but does do good research. And I'm just going to read this real quick to set the stage for SK Bain's own questioning of this. On the morning of September 11, 2001, 19 men armed with box cutters, directed by a man on dialysis in a cave fortress halfway around the world using a satellite phone and a laptop, directed the most sophisticated penetration of the most heavily defended airspace in the world, overpowering the passengers and the military combat-trained pilots on 4 commercial aircraft before flying those planes wildly off course for over an hour without being molested by a single fighter interceptor. These 19 hijackers, devout religious fundamentalists who like to drink alcohol, snort cocaine, and live with pink-haired strippers, managed to knock down 3 buildings with 2 planes in New York, while in Washington a pilot who couldn't handle a single-engine Cessna was able to fly a 757 in an 8,000-foot descending 270-degree corkscrew turn to come exactly level with the ground, hitting the Pentagon in the budget analyst office, where DoD staffers were working on the mystery of the $2.3 trillion that Defense Secretary Donald Rumsfeld had announced missing from the Pentagon's coffers in a press conference the day before, on September 10, 2001. Luckily, the news anchors knew who did it within minutes, the pundits knew within hours, the administration knew it within a day, and the evidence literally fell into the FBI's lap. But for some reason, a bunch of crazy conspiracy theorists demanded an investigation into the greatest attack on American soil in history. The investigation was delayed, underfunded, set up to fail, a conflict of interest, and a cover-up from start to finish. It was based on testimony extracted through torture, the records of which were destroyed by Gina Haspel, our CIA director. It failed to mention the existence of WTC-7, Able Danger, P-Tech, Sibel Edmonds, Osama bin Laden and the CIA, and the drills of hijacked aircraft being flown into buildings that were being simulated at the precise same time that those events were actually happening. It was lied to by the Pentagon, the CIA, the Bush administration, and as for Bush and Cheney, well, no one knows what they told it because they testified in secret, off the record, not under oath, and behind closed doors. It didn't bother to look at who funded the attacks because that question is of little practical significance. Still, the 9/11 Commission did brilliantly, answering all the questions the public had, except most of the victims' family members' questions, and pinned blame on all the people responsible, although no one so much as lost their job, determining the attacks were, quote, a failure of imagination because I don't think anyone could envision flying airplanes into buildings except the Pentagon and FEMA and NORAD and the NRO. The DIA destroyed 2.5 terabytes of data on Able Danger, but that's okay because it probably wasn't important. The SEC destroyed their records on the investigation and the insider trading before the attacks, but that's okay because destroying the records of the largest investigation in SEC history is just part of routine record keeping. NASD has classified the data they used for their model of WTC-7's collapse, but that's okay because knowing how they made their model of that collapse would, quote, jeopardize public safety. The FBI has argued that all material related to their investigation of 9/11 should be kept secret from the public, but that's okay because the FBI probably has nothing to hide. Osama bin Laden lived in a cave fortress in the hills of Afghanistan, but somehow got away. Then he was hiding out in Tora Bora, but somehow got away. Then he lived in Abbottabad for years, taunting the most comprehensive intelligence dragnet, employing the most sophisticated technology in the history of the world for 10 years, releasing video after video with complete impunity and getting younger and younger as he did so, before finally being found in a daring SEAL team raid, which wasn't recorded on video, in which he didn't resist or use his wife as a human shield, and in which these crack special forces operatives panicked and killed this unarmed man, supposedly the best source of intelligence about those dastardly terrorists on the planet. Then they dumped his body in the ocean before telling anyone about it. Then a couple dozen of that team's members died in a helicopter crash in Afghanistan. This is the story of 9/11, brought to you by the media, which told you the hard truths about JFK and incubator babies and mobile production facilities and the rescue of Jessica Lynch. If you have any questions about this story, you are a batshit, paranoid, tinfoil, dog-abusing baby hater and will be reviled by everyone. If you love your country and or freedom, happiness, rainbows, rock and roll, puppy dogs, apple pie, and your grandma, you'll never, ever, ever express doubts about any part of the story to anyone, ever. All right. So, I mean, that's just like a very dense kind of overview of like the things that, you know, and I know from researching, like those are all strange things that kind of happen, but that's kind of, I think, where that's the that's the angle that SK Bain is looking at when he first kind of dives into this world of exploring the kind of the why of 9/11 and really even the what of it, you know?
Yeah.
That there's this other dimension, this deeper performative, magical ritual dimension to it.
Yes. Actually, part of the reason why I mentioned my previous paper on 9/11 and this book and its Dracularity is that during that project we recorded some video of you in the role of SK Bain, which, you know, is pretty good. I don't know. It might just be a fun factoid, but, you know, we can also
I think I might use a little interlude for that, or put it in here, because I do kind of summarize the early parts of his book.
We definitely clipped out some good like highlights from the book.
9/11 wasn't simply a black op. It was that and more. The picture that emerges is that of 9/11 as an ultra-powerful mind control and propaganda weapon, a psychological warfare tool of enormous proportions infused with techno-sorcery and deep-level occult programming. 9/11 was a global mega-ritual, and the painstakingly reconstructed occult script for the event contained herein convincingly shows this. We must have the courage to let the evidence tell the story because, as the reader will learn, what is at stake is not simply our view of reality. September 11th, 2001 was just a prelude to what they have planned for 2012. The number sequence 9/11 had come to mean help is on the way. The sudden reversal of meaning, which is a key tactic of occultists, was designed to induce psychic stress and mental anguish to create additional inner conflict and fear. 9/11, then, was a weapon used to inflict further trauma on an unsuspecting public by pre-programming the public consciousness for decades with the formulation that 9/11 equals help. A form of subconscious injury was inflicted through the abrupt reversal of 9/11 equals terror.
But yeah, Crawley is like, there's a lot of emphasis on Sirius, and there's a whole interlude with a dog named Sirius who was killed in the towers. A
Port Authority rescue dog.
Yeah, and his sort of symbolism.
We've met Sirius, the dog star, the shining light of the occultists, whose pernicious presence is ubiquitous throughout the 9/11 mega ritual. Now, meet Sirius, the police dog, the only such animal to be killed in the attack on the Twin Towers, who died in his kennel in the basement of Tower 2 when it collapsed. Sirius, a 4.5-year-old 90-pound yellow Labrador Retriever, was an explosive detection dog with the Port Authority of New York and New Jersey Police Department. It just so happens that Sirius's badge number was 17, and the 17th card in the tarot is, wait for it, the star, which, according to many occultists, depicts what else? Sirius. Adding to the occultist delight is that K is the 11th letter of the alphabet. Hooray, another 11. Thus, K9 is the reverse of 9/11. K9, 9/11, oh, who cares, right? The intended outcome of the death of this specially named creature was, of course, that through all of the related news coverage, memorials, and tributes, the name Sirius would be heavily intermingled with 9/11, spreading like a mimetic virus into people's consciousness, 9/11 to evil. magic, Sirius, 9/11, evil magic, Sirius. You see?
One of the most interesting things about this is, well, I think that it's just very interesting from a ritual perspective that the towers themselves, again, the site is very important, and I think it's important in Bain's conception as well. And I think it's so interesting that towers are more or less identical. I guess one has an antenna, the other one doesn't, but they they're meant to look the same. And the whole thing of Bush being like, whoa, that's one terrible pilot, and it appearing kind of to be an accident until there's that act of replication. And there's SK Bain makes a thing about the significance of the number 11, which of course the towers themselves sort of resemble.
They do. I mean, do you want to start maybe with the sort of the biggest evidence he has, I think, has a lot to do with the flight numbers and the sequence in which they hit and the connection to specific texts that Aleister Crowley had written. Because that'll sort of make clear his logic that he's using. He's operating in kind of a Kabbalistic.
It's very
approach.
Associational, like all of his conclusions. But we can talk about what the flight numbers were. They were references to chapters from the Book of the Law, I think that he said,
yes.
right?
There were. I know the Liebherr numbers, but the very first plane to crash was American Airlines Flight 11, and of course, if you use the sort of flight abbreviation for American Airlines 11, it is AA11, and so SK Bain goes into what did AA stand for? Wasn't it like Argentum Astrum or something like that?
Yeah.
Wasn't it like Silver Star, which is also associated with Sirius? But that was the occult society that he formed after he left the Golden Dawn around the turn of the century, and then the AA eventually morphed into the Ordo Templi Orientis, the OTO, which we talked about in the Kenneth Anger episode a lot.
Right, yeah. AA. I remember that Crowley said that the Prophet Muhammad was like an AA magus or something during his interest in Islam and his travels in Egypt and that type of thing. But it's Argentium Astrum, which is the Star of Silver.
And so that's just this is all kind of circumstantial to say the least, but it's interesting just to rattle off all of these strange numerical coincidences that happen. So AA11 crashes in one of the twin towers, which resemble an 11. They're like two pillars. And on September, the Pillars of Hermes, which is the god of what,
commerce,
that's actually interesting.
Communication, commerce,
right. When we talked earlier about kind of different gods that would be worshipped, whether it's like Baphomet or Lucifer or Satan or some of the or Set or Isis or other kind of ancient gods, I think Hermes is a very interesting one that probably it seems to have a lot of influence on the traditions of Freemasonry, and also definitely with Aleister Crowley and the kind of more explicitly darker occult. He's kind of a god of the divine mysteries, right? But then he's also the god of commerce and business.
Well, there's a conflation between Hermes, which is natural because they have the same name. There's a conflation between Hermes, who's the sort of Greek god, is like a psychopomp, who definitely has sort of occult resonances. And then there's Hermes Trismegistus, who is a different figure, who is sort of the founder or the key figure of Hermeticism, who's kind of associated with Thoth or Idris and various entities like that. But of course, there's some conflation that can occur between him and Hermes. And these the idea of the Pillars of Hermes is one that SK Bain kind of, you can see them on sort of covers or frontispieces of the Book of the Law, and SK Bain connects them with the sort of the two towers of the, if you have a copy of the Book of the Law, you'll often see these two pillars, and SK Bain makes that parallel,
Yeah, and he's he says from the outset. I'm just looking at a quote here from early in the book where he cites an author named Michael Tsarion and a piece called Symbolic Literacy, and from where he's coming from, why should we care that AA11 crashed into one of the 11 towers on 9/11? he says, in an insightful piece titled Symbolic Literacy, author Michael Sarian observes that we suffer from, quote, chronic symbol illiteracy and are subjected to subliminal and subtextual persuasion that constitutes what he refers to as a psychic dictatorship. This dictatorship, Sarian says, involves the deliberate and subversive manipulation and public purveyance of words, images, numbers, colors, rhythms, and symbols, which are subsequently directed via ubiquitous media oracles toward the limbic areas of the human brain, which produces an elaborate and insidious cryptic language specifically designed to stimulate conflict between fantasy and reality. So he's drawing this link to like media technology, what we see on television, or in the news, or here on the radio, as basically as imbued with these symbols that are subliminal and subversive and serve to like act on the limbic areas of our brain and manipulate us. So he's saying that this is sort of like I guess like the intent, the will behind setting it up in this way kind of adds to the power of it, I guess. Even if most people are completely unaware. And, I think, can we say, I don't know, to what extent is that scientifically, accurate? Like, is that literally true? But I think in a vaguer sense, it does. I think the things we know this about, commodity fetishism and things like that in our culture, that that media does do this to us in like a broad way.
Yeah.
It's often hidden right in, like we said, I think maybe in episode 1, that it's like, it's often kind of, it's not subliminal in like the Trust Naomi, Trust Ultra kind of way. It's kind of like hidden in plain sight in your face.
Yeah. And
that's a much more common way of doing it.
Yeah, and the idea that these have an effect, again, like it's something that, I don't know, like people use different sort of epistemological tools, whether it be like, oh, we need to scientifically prove like that these things work, but that whole like, I don't know if that'll ever really be properly borne out, but the ideas that symbols have power is obviously one of like the oldest ideas, and it's really inextricable from like, it's there's kind of a dialectic or a binary in what you're saying, where it's like, is it scientifically true? Like, the way the limbic system is being stimulated, like, and, it's baked into that whole thing, this whole idea of like appealing to the sense of like scientific authority. But really, like, the whole genesis of our ideas about science, which have evolved so much. Like, if you go back just a couple of decades, like, you'll get to a point where like our notions of how the universe works are completely different. Like, we've thrown out things like so dramatically, and our ideas about like evolution, our ideas about astrophysics, like all these things have like changed tremendously, and like they're constantly evolving. But really, the notion of symbols having some kind of operation upon the world, that the idea that you can affect a change in in human behavior, or in people's minds, or in the fabric of experience or phenomenality through the use of symbols, through like semiotics and language, is like an incredibly old idea that is inextricable from like the ideas of the sciences. I mean, if you go back to like Hermeticism, that's like one of the main ways that scientific ideas are transmitted between cultures, like the sort of Hermetic corpus, which is associated with Hermes Trismegistus, as I mentioned, who has some association with Thoth and sometimes with Hermes.
Thoth comes from ancient Egypt, right?
Yeah.
And did Hermes Trismegistus also?
Is his real name.
Yeah. Is Hermes Trismegistus a confirmed historical person? Or
someone wrote like the Nag Hammadi documents, and like I guess he's not maybe a confirmed historical person, but he
perhaps
sometimes he's associated with being Thoth. And also, like, the Egyptian gods always are given, because there's obviously like a huge cultural crossover between Greece and Egypt. A lot of the time Greek gods are given, Egyptian gods are given Greek parallels. Like we've talked about Set in the past. He's often associated with Typhon. And Thoth is often associated with Hermes, Ra, maybe associated with Zeus, and things like that. So,
and we'll get to like later. Thoth will come up again when we talk about like the ancient Egyptian calendar, which I guess is still followed by Coptic Christians in Egypt, which actually starts on, I believe, September, or at least that year. It started on September 11th and is the date when of Sirius's heliacal rising.
Yes.
Heliacal rising. So basically, it was New Year's Day for like Sirius worshippers. Was 9/11 2001. But yeah, we'll touch on that like kind of down the road. The one other thing I'll say about Flight 11, and SK Bain goes into this, and this is really a cornerstone of like the theory he's building here, is that Aleister Crowley was a big fan of the number 11 and considered it, quote, the number of magic in itself and therefore suitable to all types of operation, as well as the sacred number par excellence of the new Aeon, the Aeon of Horus. And he also stated in the Book of the Law, my number is 11, as all their numbers who are of us. And basically, that also goes back, like in the Kabbalah. I guess the number 11 was imbued with a kind of sinister significance, and was basically the idea of like it represents like magic in itself, the number of magic in itself. So like the very first plane announces that this is a magical operation in Bain's view.
One of my complaints about SK Bain's book is he doesn't really cite like his sources very carefully, but I did track down, like, because I was like, did Crowley really say that, like in what context? And I did track it down. I forget. I think it might be Liber ABA or something like that. But it's subtitled Magic in Theory and Practice. And he said this: the most generally useful and adaptable battery is composed of 11 strokes. The principal reasons for this are as follows. Firstly, and he puts these in quotation marks, so I don't know, maybe because he's talking about numbers, he doesn't, but anyway, 11, as you said, is a number of magic in itself. It is therefore suitable to all types of operation. Secondly, it is a sacred number par excellence of the new Aeon. As it is written in the Book of the Law, 11, as are all their numbers who are of us. Thirdly, it is a number of the letters in the word abrahadabra, which is the word of the Aeon. The structure of this word is such that it expresses the great work in every one of its aspects. Lastly, it is possible thereby to express all possible spheres of operation, whatever their nature. This is effected by making an equation between the number of the serapha and the difference between that number and 11. For example, 2 degree equals 9 square is the formula of the grade of initiation corresponding to Yesod. Yesod represents the instability of air, the sterility of the moon, but these qualities are balanced in it by the stability implied in its position as the foundation, and by its function of generation. This complex is further equilibrated by identifying it with the number 2 of Chakma, which possesses the airy quality, being the word. The lunar quality, being the reflection of the sun of Kether, as Yesod is the son of Tiphareth. It is the wisdom which is the foundation by being creation. This entire cycle of ideas is expressed in the double formula: 2 degree equals 9 square, 9 degree equals 2 square, and any of these ideas may be selected and articulated by a suitable battery. So you can definitely see like many of the resonances there with 9/11, the idea of like the air,
nine
the
squared.
Foundation, stability, instability, 9, 11 minus 9, like all that stuff. So yeah, you could definitely see how someone of the sensibility of SK Bain looking at this would be like, oh my God, like it's a lot. So.
And he quotes, I think SK Bain is convinced of this, that author William Ramsey observed that Crowley, quote, wrote numerous books detailing his vision of the ideal society, the strong over the weak, the maintenance of a patriarchal aristocracy ruling over a slave state, and the Darwinian killing of the unfit. According to the great beast, a small elite must rule over the masses. Quote, you'll observe that I am advocating an aristocratic revolution, and so I am. So I think that's pretty self-indicting for Crowley. For anybody that still thinks he's cool or just like an edgy rock and roll libertine, he wanted an aristocratic revolution and the Darwinian killing off of people he thought was unfit, and a like thelemic aristocracy like ruling over everybody. So I mean, pretty in line with like reactionaries and their world objectives, I'd say, in like the early and just the 20th century in general, and probably this century too. It's very simpatico. And he also says that 11, he says, is the book of uniting oneself to a particular deity by devotion. Oh, actually, no, that is the next plane. So, okay. So, sorry. So after flight AA-11 crashes into the North Tower, after that, flight 175 crashes into the South Tower. And SK Bain has sort of drawn the connection to Crowley's Liber 175, which, as I just said, is the book of uniting oneself to a particular deity by devotion. And he says in the book, concerning the ceremonies, prepare a powerful invocation of the particular deity. Let it be known that this method is adaptable to the necessities of all. Let him take anything soever and consecrate it. Let him consecrate each thing that he useth to the service of that particular deity. And Bain says, meaning this is a ceremonial invocation, the act of invoking upon a deity, spirit, etc., for aid, protection, inspiration, or the like. Flight 11, consecrated with the number of magic and declaring the commencement of a magical operation. Flight 175, invoking Liber 175, stating the intent and purpose of the operation, i.e. invoking and uniting with a particular deity who, he believes to be Lucifer.
Yes.
So
one
there you
thing
go.
that's interesting that he talked about in this book is the famous face of Satan in 9/11. Do you remember that?
I did read that. Yeah, which was actually Rudolf Steiner's portrait of, I forget the name. It was a Zoroastrian god that was sort of
Ahriman. The sort of dualistic. It resembles the sculpture of Ahriman that Rudolf Steiner did, according to SK Bain. I mean, it kind of just looks like a generic Satan, but it definitely bears like a strong resemblance to that sculpture. It's interesting that he makes that connection, because I remember that was like another aspect of 9/11 that was interesting during the time, was the sort of proliferation of all these sort of stories, like all these urban legends about what was going to happen next, and
exactly, and the spiritual kind of
email things, the
right. Dirty bomb thing. You're right, was a big deal for a while, and I think I'll give SK Bain credit there, because he ponders whether or not surely this image of the Zoroastrian devil is probably not a coincidence, but he does give you a kind of material out there by saying it's definitely possible that somebody could have just photoshopped that and then released it to the wire services, and then meant for it to be found, and was kind of like an inside tribute to basically the dark forces, kind of like a shout out, which seems actually quite easy to do. And even in a way, people weren't savvy enough about photo editing back in 2001 with computers. It was still kind of a niche thing. And I feel like it would be relatively easy to pass that in to the news stream and get some people jumping on it, and not. If you did it today, people might be like, "Oh, is this shopped?" But
they might say that, but there's also an aspect of just pareidolia to it. It looks like there's many things that look like faces, like clouds. It's literally a cloud. There's just a couple spots of shadow. It's there's a man on the moon and stuff like that. Of course, the famous face on Mars. But that's what's so interesting about it, I think, is that once this is sort of identified, once it's seen, who can say that this isn't a face, who can, I think that the binary between it's just a bunch of clouds, but when people notice once it's observed, once it's experienced, that's what is significant. That's what matters, I think.
Exactly. In a way, it's kind of it's not totally irrelevant, but it's somewhat irrelevant to the effect, the intent, the effect of the operation, the outcome of having a kind of psychological effect on people that that it was presented to the public in this way, and kind of disseminated as this scary thing. And then because you can't exactly kind of pin it down, or even if you say it was just smoke, it's just a weird coincidence. So it's still in this category of things in your head that are kind of just bizarre. And the whole 9/11 thing was so bizarre that it just it just amps the fear and the terror and the paranoia and not knowing up even further.
Yeah, another thing that he kind of talks about right after that is the correspondence between the sort of Rider-Waite hanged man card at the tarot with the falling man.
That is very bizarre. The bent leg.
Uncanny.
Yeah, the bent leg is it is very similar to the tarot card of the upside down hanging man.
Yes. It's I think that's one of the most compelling sort of parallels that he points out. And it's quite striking, and it's very interesting. Because he's perfectly vertical. He has that exact bent leg, and again, this is like a famous image. It became like a defining image of that day, like this this person. And I think that probably does have some significance, like whether it makes an impression.
It was strange that SK Bain pointed this out, and I actually had missed it in earlier times looking through this, that that man's brother was one of the village people.
Wow.
Yeah. Just
I thought
bizarre.
that he had never been identified, but I guess maybe...
According to SK Bain, maybe in the updated version of this book, there was a whole, I believe, I don't know if it was like a New Yorker article, there was a whole magazine kind of article about this man and the mystery around, like, nobody could figure out who he was. This is back in, like 2002 or whatever, and became a very iconic image. And there was a whole, I think there was even like a movie kind of based on like searching for this guy and like who was he, and it was just such like a frightening image, and so symbolic, like a man kind of erect with like one leg bent, like dive, sort of just like upside down, plunging into the abyss, and like the steel pillar of the World Trade Center kind of in the background, it looks kind of, it is very uncanny and otherworldly, like he's sort of floating or flying or something.
You immediately, when you see it, you picture yourself like in his condition, and just like the whole like soul freezing terror of being like so high up, like just falling helplessly. And his clothing, everything about it is so
So I guess let's move on to the next plane that hits, which again SK Bain ties to a specific writing of Aleister Crowley, and that was American Airlines Flight 77, that's right, AA77, which crashed into the west side of the Pentagon in Arlington, Virginia. And he notes here a few interesting things about the Pentagon that really are a little bizarre. Like it sits on the 77th parallel. It is 77 feet tall, and he even throws in a little quote from our old friend Anton LaVey, who wrote in the Satanic Bible in 1969. He basically had 77 names of Satan. Like there are 77 infernal names in the Satanic Bible.
Yeah, of course, like 7, as we've seen like in some other episodes of the show, is like one of the most important like occult numbers, like 777, and yes, anything to do with 7. And
another detail that Bain points out that actually I think I had forgotten about, but there were in the restricted airspace over the White House and the Capitol that morning, I think maybe an hour or two before the plane came in and hit, there was a plane, a military surveillance plane, which is often referred to as a doomsday plane, that is meant to like be a command and control center in the event of like a national attack or a nuclear war or something like that. And it was flying low over DC. Multiple people saw it, and I guess people had looked into it, and its call sign was Venus 77.
Wow.
Which, of course, has a whole thing to Venus, and like
star.
a Venus is representative of blah, blah, blah. But just like another 77 right there. And it bears mentioning that the sort of the groundbreaking ceremony that began construction on the Pentagon was September 11th, 1941. And it was exactly 60 years later that it was attacked. And attacked in a very strange pattern, in a way, because the plane, I think, came in from the north, it had to do like as I read in that little parody summary, it had to do like a perfect like 270 degree corkscrew turn to hit the side of the Pentagon that it hit. And I guess the flight instructors at the schools where that particular hijacker had learned to fly, they rated his flying as like incredibly poor and said that he really couldn't he couldn't even get rated to fly a single engine Cessna. So he was like a shitty pilot. And so it's something a lot of people have sort of harped on of like, why didn't he just crash into like the north end of the Pentagon? Like that wouldn't have been that hard. But instead he does this huge corkscrew thing and like nails it perfectly and then blows up the accounting office and kills everybody in the Office of Naval Intelligence who was like looking into like money laundering and like Pentagon black ops. Like, okay, that seems a little strange. But I mean, that aside, it's just another Crowleyan, and I forget, what does Liber 77 say? Oh my God, how could we forget? It's called Liber Oz.
Oh.
And that's a thing that he also gets into, is the kind of the recurrence of like Oz imagery. Like we talked about Kenneth Anger and kind of his fascination with like the Wizard of Oz books and how they were based on, by E. Frank Baum, they were based on a lot of Rosicrucian principles. So Oz, people even think that like there is a theory of like the JFK assassination is mass ritual, basically, that points out that like Lee Harvey Oswald, like things like that.
Yeah, it's basically a pretty short epistle. It's basically the rights of people according to Thelema. It's like
that's right. Yeah,
strong,
I did save
this. Is our law and the joy of the world.
Yeah. Say that again. The quote at the top.
The law of the strong. This is our law and the joy of the world. And do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law. Thou hast no right but to do thy will. Do that, and no other shall say nay. Every man and every woman is a star. There is no God but man. Woof. Man has the right to live by his own law, to live in the way that he wills to do, to work as he will, to play as he will, to rest as he will, to die when and how he will. Man has the right to eat what he will, to drink what he will, to dwell where he will, to move as he will on the face of the earth. Man has the right to think what he will, to speak what he will, to write what he will, to draw, paint, carve, etch, mold, build as he will, to dress as he will. Man has the right to love as he will, take your fill and will of love as he will, when and where and with whom ye will. Man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights. The slave shall serve. Love is the law, love under will.
Yikes. And maybe that, I don't even know if Bain makes this connection, but if you're thinking about it as kind of like a coded message to people that maybe were investigating financial malfeasance in the Pentagon, in that very office, the fifth kind of the fifth commandment in this Liber, man has the right to kill those who would thwart these rights, which is the right of kind of the global like bourgeoisie to own everything and use the world as their playground and like keep everybody and the slaves shall serve.
Yeah, that's the most chilling way to end that whole thing.
So in a way it's like it's going straight at like the investigators of, even if you're a military person, we have the right to kill you if you try to thwart our rights by exposing all the criminal shit we've been doing. Yeah, so that happened, and then I guess maybe we can talk briefly about Flight 93, which he draws some connections with.
Yeah, didn't he say that like "let's roll" had some kind of occult significance, like the meaning of the words "let's roll"?
Possibly. I don't think I had it written down.
Like, let's roll were the last words she heard him say as he put down the phone and joined a group of fellow passengers as they prepared to attempt to regain control of the airplane from the hijackers. As the heroes of United Airlines Flight 93 fought to break into the pilot's cabin, the cockpit voice recorder captured the hijackers chanting, "Allah is the greatest." Moments later, in Shanksville, Pennsylvania, the aircraft struck the ground with such force that the only thing visibly remaining was a smoking crater. The official version of the crash of Flight 93 is that the aircraft was traveling at such a high speed and steep angle as struck the ground at a reclaimed coal mine in Pennsylvania that it was completely swallowed up by the earth. One could surmise that the soil itself might have been loosely compacted as a result of excavations, and thus would have been a contributing factor in the total disappearance of the plane. As the local coroner surveyed the impact site shortly following the crash, he found scarce evidence of the aircraft or its occupants. The largest human remains he initially recovered was a section of 5 vertebrae. Yes, he calls this a disappearing act.
An airmail greeting to Thelemites worldwide.
He makes a bigger deal about how it's Shanksville was kind of where it crashed, like, and that they were sort of shanked in this way, and he also connects that to Crowley, being British and
Yeah.
Shines.
And the numerical significance of Flight 93, because of course SK Bain does find one, is that the two phrases that are like the central philosophical concepts of Thelema are "do what thou wilt shall be the whole of the law," and "love is the law, love under will," and employing isopsophy, which is the Greek practice of assigning a numerical value to letters of a word and then adding them to obtain their sum, similar to gematria. The value of both these words, will and love, equals 93. So it is common for Thelemites to greet each other with 93 in person, as well as in the opening and closing of written correspondence. The custom derives from Crowley's instruction that Thelemites should greet each other with the law of Thelema by saying, do what thou wilt should be the whole of the law. Since saying the entire law can be cumbersome, using 93 has become a shorthand.
Yes.
So, I mean, he says, I wasn't sure if this is kind of him just, speculating, but I guess Crowley wrote in a letter, "I am often asked why I begin my letters this way, with 93. No matter whether I'm writing to my lady or to my butcher, I begin with these 11 words." Interesting. Those are 11 words. That's another thing. Why? How else should I begin? What other greeting could be so glad? Look, brother, we are free. Rejoice with me, sister. There is no law beyond do what thou wilt. And so that's another thing that technically does check out. Crowley wrote that 93 is also the number of the secret word of the neophyte of AA, a word indicating symbolically the whole course of existence. And the let's roll became a very big kind of battle cry, taken up by President Bush, and was emblazoned on Air Force fighter jets, fire trucks, athletic jerseys, and countless T-shirts, baseball caps, and souvenir buttons. And it was commemorated in popular songs such as Neil Young's rather kind of cringy song "Let's Roll," which actually I'll probably put it in an interlude. It's it's just damn, they got to Neil Young too. Though of course, I mean, he was in the mix back in the '60s, so I don't want to say. I do like Neil Young, so it's a bummer to see him kind of just signing up for the Let's Roll Brigade and not kind of thinking about what that would be used for. But such was pop music in 2001 and 2002. It was a dark time for American music and I would say culture in general. This really another interesting parallel to coronavirus, whereas there's actually a material shutdown of production and things like that in 2020 that prevent us from even making TV and movies. There wasn't anything, the country kind of came back online with the exception of downtown Manhattan, pretty quickly. I think, SNL came back. There was The Daily Show. LA was unaffected. But the psychic impact, it was almost like a psychic shutdown of the country in that you could only talk about Let Freedom Ring, Let's Roll, and then that quickly morphed into Support Our Troops and kind of all this other shit. And it was just a really kind of grim time. I mean, if you had your doubts about not even 9/11, but invading Afghanistan, you basically had to shut the fuck up for at least a year. There was no space in the official culture for entertaining any kind of skepticism about what Bush was doing the first year after 9/11.
Right, yeah. It was not a time for that. Not at all. Yeah, for any kind of skepticism of any of that, for sure, was not about to be tolerated.
I believe there were almost nobody in Congress opposed any of it. I think Barbara Lee was the one who voted against, invading Afghanistan, but now she's like a Russia-gator. And Russ Feingold, I think, voted against the Patriot Act in Wisconsin. But, that was pretty much it.
Yeah. There's a bunch of good Bain content in terms of, I guess, one that jumped out to me relative to what we've been talking about on the podcast. Of course, there's so much around Building 7, to go back to the whole issue of 7. And he talks about how it was, they had this sort of trapezoidal roof and everything, I think was something that, we have discussed in the past and made. He
mentions the order of the trapezoid.
Right, yeah.
And the fact that it's a frustrated triangle and kind of has some kind of weird mystical significance because of that.
Apparently it was also known as the Solomon Brothers Building, another connection to the Templars, which we have discussed, and the whole idea of, the temple, the King Solomon's Temple, Al-Aqsa Mosque. So he draws a connection there and its importance in Freemasonry and everything. There's this whole thing about the 47th problem of Euclid, but I feel like he doesn't use this properly, the occult significance of it. But he does talk a lot about the order of the trapezoid, and before he goes on to the sort of astrological significance and the Statue of Liberty as kind of a Luciferian or Promethean type of figure holding the blaze aloft. And so there's really a deep
Promethean kind of Lucifer statue that was designed by a Freemason, and
so you can see the deep idea of how this is a whole ritual complex that this
I love the idea of the kind of other secretly ritualized architecture around the World Trade Center kind of having a ringside seat. The one of the more interesting and kind of spooky ones is the Millennium Hilton Hotel, which I think is right across the street from the World Trade Center, and is kind of this very sleek, all black obelisk of a skyscraper that I think by their own admission was modeled after the monolith from 2001: A Space Odyssey. And so immediately right there you think, 2001, no, because some of the pictures of it's like this monolith is just sort of posted up right there, watching these towers get torn to pieces and demolished, and it he said it was basically bearing witness to a sinister ritual of human transformation.
The next thing I feel that really is meaty is the serious stuff, which is great about this Port Authority rescue dog who I guess fell in the line of duty. His badge number was 17, which in tarot is the star. So he of course hooked up on that. K9.
K is the 11th letter of the alphabet, so 11-9, a reversal of 9-11. Sirius is also referred to as the dog star. It's Canis Major, which means the greater dog. It's actually the hunting dog of Orion, I think.
Yeah, maybe. I'm not
or
sure.
It's the nose
it's definitely
of Orion.
The dog star.
Of Orion's dog.
The classic character from Harry Potter, as we know, Sirius Black, the dog man. So he, that's named after Sirius. But he quotes
Sirius Radio, of course. Sirius Satellite Radio, of course. Took off shortly after. I feel early 2000s was really when Sirius
definitely
became.
That was the heyday of Sirius Satellite Radio. And that's a big sort of axe to grind that SK Bain has is with Sirius. And he quotes this sort of memorial poem that was written for the dog, and I guess posted online.
Oh, it's really creepy.
Sirius, dazzling sparkle in the distance, brightest star on earth, closest to our heart. You came and shared your light for such a little while, brought such brightness, gave such joy. Now you shine above and watch from distant skies as the guardian you were, as the guardian you are still. Companion, guide, protector, friend, partner and pal on constant alert. Courageous and cautious, patient and obedient, strong in spirit, gentle in design, quick to defend, eager to follow, disciplined for action, poised for careful command. Sirius, brilliant in the night, star of the first magnitude, hero of the same, 9 light years away, held here in our hearts for eternity. Run free across the rainbow bridge and in green pastures. You have done your job well, friend. Like, so, yeah, I kind of do see the, like, creepy occult resonances of this
whoever wrote this seems
in a
very
way
invested in the kind of mystical double entendres of
it's weird. On one hand, it is like sad this dog died and everything, but like the whole eeriness of like in this context of you have done your job well, friend. It's a creepy link that is being made here. But I mean, of course, I know many people who have named their dogs Sirius. It's a popular name for dogs, but this poem like really could be like from like an Aleister Crowley epistle or book for sure. Like it's has that strange style,
mystical quality to it.
It definitely has that mystical aspect to it. Anyway.
Oh yeah. I also just wanted to throw out the other date that he throws out as like very conspicuous is August 5th, 8/5. And I guess what he points out is that the groundbreaking kind of ceremonies for both the World Trade Center and the Statue of Liberty were both August 5th. So he sees that as maybe some kind of possible connection to, they both kind of had the same Masonic origin. And just to take it down to like the realer thing, he does mention later that the Rockefeller brothers, David and Nelson, were heavily involved in the conception and getting the project of like the World Trade Center basically off the ground in the 60s and 70s. And, at that time, David Rockefeller was the head of Chase Manhattan Bank, and Nelson Rockefeller, who I think had worked in some kind of CIA psychological warfare capacities for the U.S. government after World War II, went on to become the governor of New York and then later the vice president under Gerald Ford. And in a way, you could almost, I think he even suggests that in a way it's like those two towers kind of represented both the Rockefeller brothers and kind of were a monument to like their mighty stature in business. But the Rockefellers are into so much suspicious spiritual shit that I would not be surprised if there was something deeper going on with their kind of choice of, and if people are saying that, these towers, some people do say that these towers were kind of maybe the plot to blow them up one day was sort of baked into even like the construction of it. I guess it had a lot of like structural kind of issues with it and things like that.
Yeah, well, it's definitely SK Bain's idea that this was like a massive like sacrificial complex.
Which is not quite as it's not quite as wild as saying that this has been planned for 1,000 years before the city of New York existed, but like to say that this all happened within the lifetime of at least David Rockefeller and kind of was like a culmination of his sort of life's worth to like re-entrench and extend American Anglo-American imperialism over the entire world, and then inaugurate this new kind of like dark age of empire. He said a lot of weird quotes that SK Bain quotes of people for years have dogged us and said that we were part of like an insidious conspiracy of elites who were like secretly managing to build a one world government. If that's the charge, like I plead guilty and I'm proud of it and stuff like that. Like he said a lot of that stuff in the 90s, right after I think curiously the Soviet Union collapsed, where he finally felt safe to kind of come out and kind of brag about the secret game. He said like, I thank the New York Times and Newsweek and all of these and the Washington Post for their discretion over the years, even though they were aware of what was going on in our meetings. And he co-founded the Trilateral Commission, was big on the Council on Foreign Relations, all these kind of imperialist planning groups that developed a lot of like the strategy deployed by like Brzezinski and Kissinger and Reagan in the 80s and definitely the Bushes. The Bushes were like deeply involved in both of those organizations, and I think it was Dave Emery who claims that like the Trilateral Commission really refers to kind of like a new American-led axis of like a Germany-led crypto-Nazi EU, like a crypto-fascist like Japan, and a like crypto-Nazi United States, and like that's the trilateral axis of the New World Order, basically. I don't know how much is literally true, but there's always a lot of weird Nazi people and bankers who were friends with Nazis, floating around in this thing. So anyways, like that, there's just a lot of suspicious stuff about these towers themselves, what they represented, the people that built them, and the eventual, I think Larry Silverstein was the landlord or the owner of these towers, right? And he gave that suspicious
He's the famous
quote.
pull it guy, but
he said pull it, which he meant like pull the firefighters out, but people thought that meant in like controlled demolition parlance, that meant detonate it because it's a ruined building.
Well, he basically did mean like destroy, like let it fall, and give up on it. So, but people think like pull the trigger of the controlled demolition is like also a interpretation of those words.
I see. Yeah. And of course, if he said pull it, that means they would have had to rig that building with explosives, or there were explosives already in it, and they were able to rather quickly detonate it and bring it to the ground, which would then make the theory that they did that to the World Trade Towers 1 and 2 kind of much more plausible, because it's like, oh, he did it to this building that wasn't going to fall over. It just had these bad fires in it. Or, it was just like kind of irreparably kind of totaled by this damage. And so then he came out and said, no, I meant like pull the firefighters out. I didn't really mean it like that. And that's been something people, Bain included, have like jumped onto. And
I don't know if I'm sure if SK Bain like endorses the nano. I've always been very skeptical of any kind of like nanothermite or like controlled demolition type of thing. Like, I think that there's definitely more to 9/11 than meets the eye, for sure. Definitely more than we were told. But I don't really subscribe to anything to do with the controlled demolition of any of the buildings.
You don't find it highly suspicious that 3 of those skyscrapers all collapsed in exactly the same way, despite being damaged in different places, and they weren't hit at the exact same structural point. One of them just had fires, and they all collapsed as if they were controlled demos.
Well, I guess they collapsed as if they were controlled. Like, in what way? You mean like they didn't topple over? They collapsed.
Like if you've ever seen them, exactly. They didn't break off. Like the top part that was compromised didn't like lean over and fall on the rest of Wall Street, which would have been absolutely catastrophic. It would have destroyed like dozens of buildings. And you think if you're planning this operation to destroy these 2 buildings, but you don't want to like annihilate all of Wall Street, it would almost be reckless to not control demo them.
Yeah, but I think that it's in the way that they were built. Like, I think that it is possible that there's, that the way that they were built, that's like how they would fall, like it when due to the heat. I think that is possible. I think that leaving aside whether they were designed to fall, like I think that.
I have heard that they were designed to pancake, basically. Like that is a normal way to design skyscrapers, because you don't want them breaking off and falling over.
That's another. Yeah, exactly. That's a different way of interpreting it from saying that they were always meant to be part of this ritual. But I think that also, like, for whatever reason, that is like that. And I think that it is like, I know that there's been some dispute about this in terms of like saying like whether it was possible for the fires to cause the collapse of Building 7, but I think
fuel
like
can't
it's
melt
still
steel beams, or
it's still
that
unclear.
kind of
it's
meme.
Still unclear whether like this was just a structurally unsound building that fell over. I think that in terms of the controlled demo stuff, I just think that there's an easier way to like go about this. Like you would do that if you wanted to collapse the towers, but if you just wanted to do this, then maybe you wouldn't even necessarily need for them to collapse. I don't know. Like,
actually, I saw a point that somebody made the other day that pointed out, lest we forget, that there was a previous Islamic quote unquote terrorist attack on the World Trade Center in 1993 that blew up a bomb in the basement and actually, killed several people, injured a lot of people, and did a lot of like damage to the building. And I'm not saying like, it's like just to point out that the impact of that was kind of like a oh shit event, but it didn't open this door for a complete transformation of law, culture, our foreign policy, our kind of society. It didn't have the magical, if you will, kind of psychological, like mind war effect that you needed out of an operation like that. So in a way, you had to go all the way with it. Thinking in terms of Bain's antagonists here, like you would have to go all the way, even in just a practical sense, to sort of really drive home the apocalyptic impact of this thing. Well,
I think definitely in terms of Bain's theory, you need to collapse the towers for sure. Like he says, I think this is a good quote from SK Bain. The Twin Towers were sacrificial altars or vessels and were themselves sacrificed as part of the 9/11 mega ritual. The mass human sacrifice and the destruction of the sacrificial vessels, recalling the burning of the Wicker Man, were performed in the presence of these 4 oversized occult symbols, each of which bears its own significance and meaning. He's talking about like things that are around the tower, like the architecture around the towers, like the pyramids and stuff.
Yeah.
And he says, more than one of these symbols invokes the blazing star, Sirius, and it also is possible that these 4 symbols together constitute a coherent occult statement. Perhaps they are a 3-dimensional explication of what could well be the ultimate goal of the mega ritual itself, the transmutation of human consciousness through fear and terror, which is kind of, what you're getting at. But
that's very mind war,
Yes, but I think that definitely in terms of Bain's schema, you definitely do have to use the planes. And I think that the planes is definitely part of the horror of 9/11 is maybe the idea of like you yourself being in that position, just like on your commute, so I think that the planes are important to like the horrifying aspect of it. And I think that in order to have the same impact, they'd have to collapse the towers. But in terms of the I guess that I could see how like maybe if you had to, but I'm not sure if I feel like you wouldn't have to use controlled demolition. I feel like they could have done it a different way. Like even if they wanted to destroy, like in some theories, people say they want to destroy certain offices. I feel like they could have like slammed those planes to the base of the towers and then like let them fall down. And I think,
but again, we get back to the point of like if we're assuming this is like a wider network doing it, they don't want the tower to like tip over.
Well, I don't know. Yeah, I don't know about that. I feel like if you're already committing to it, like if you, but it's also, you have to entertain like a lot of different things in terms of like their motives and like if we're gonna go with kind of the. Should I speak really quickly about the Project Hammer hypothesis, which is almost one of my personal kind of pet favorites of sort of 9/11 hypotheses that give it a very grounded but like no less chilling motivation for doing this that's like very different from SK Bain's, but SK Bain does cite it in the appendix of his book.
Where were you when the world stopped turning on that September day? Were you in the yard with your wife and children or working on some stage in LA? Did you stand there in shock at the sight of that black smoke rising against that blue sky? Did you shout out in anger and fear for your neighbor, or did you just sit down and cry? Did you weep for the children who lost their dear loved ones, pray for the ones who don't know? Did you rejoice for the people who walked from the rubble and sob for the ones left below? Did you burst out with pride for the red, white, and blue and the heroes who died just doing what they do? Did you look up to heaven for some kind of answer and look at yourself and what really matters? I'm just a singer of simple songs. I'm not a real political man. I watch CNN, but I'm not sure I can tell you the difference in Iraq and Iran. But I know Jesus and I talk to God, and I remember this from when I was young. Faith, hope, and love are some good things he gave us, and the greatest is love. Where were you when the world stopped turning on that September day? Teaching a class full of innocent children, or driving down some cold interstate. Did you feel guilty cause you're a survivor? In a crowded room, did you feel alone? Did you call up your mother and tell her you loved her? Did you dust off that Bible at home? Did you open your eyes and hope it never happened? Close your eyes and not go to sleep? Did you notice the sunset the first time in ages? Speak to some stranger on the street? Did you lay down at night and think of tomorrow? Go out and buy you a gun? Did you turn off that violent old movie you're watching and turn on I Love Lucy reruns? Did you go to a church and hold hands with some strangers, stand in line and give your own blood? Did you just stay home and cling tight to your family? Thank God you had somebody to love. I'm just a singer of simple songs. I'm not a real political man. I watch CNN, but I'm not sure I can tell you the difference in Iraq and Iran. But I know Jesus and I talk to God, and I remember this from when I was young. Faith, hope, and love are some good things he gave us, and the greatest is love. I'm just a singer of simple songs. I'm not a real political man. I watch CNN, but I'm not sure I can tell you the difference in Iraq and Iran. But I know Jesus and I talk to God, and I remember this from when I was young. Faith, hope, and love are some good things he gave us, and the greatest is love. And the greatest is love. And the greatest is love. Where were you when the world stopped turning on that September day?